Good morning, everyone. Guten Erev Shabbos. Guten Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Tomorrow is as well. So please remember that in the davening, both today and tomorrow, that we have all the appropriate additions for Rosh Chodesh, which includes Musaf on Shabbos. We say Ata Yatzarta, and all the Hallel and additions as well. Just an interesting halacha that actually applies for Sfiras HaOmer and Rosh Chodesh Iyar, although this is what you might call a waste of a good halacha, is that Shulchan Aruch paskins that even if you're holding the first half of Sfira, most of the authorities believe that you're allowed to get a haircut today because in honor of Rosh Chodesh and in honor of Shabbos, only when Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbos. So, if by some reason, maybe, I don't know, you're in Georgia, or you have the ability to get a haircut, then one is allowed to get a haircut today. But otherwise, we're like everybody else where there's really nowhere to go. So anyway, I just thought you'd like to know about that. Today is, and the parsha is Tazria and Metzora, as well as Rosh Chodesh reading. And today is the 15th day of the Omer. Please remember to count the Omer. 15, I have to go back to my childhood. One of the great disappointments of my childhood. I don't know if that's the word you could say, but I remember being in summer camp and I found out that Thurman Munson had died. Growing up as a Yankee fan and hearing how he died in such a tragic fashion was very, very traumatic for me, to say the least. But Thurman Munson, number 15. Let's please continue to daven for a refuah shalema for all those who need it, but particularly for Ivan Sobel, Mordechai ben Elka, and for Harav Rafal Zev ben Rickel, and of course for Rivka Bas Liba, and all those within our community and all over that need a refuah shalema. Please take a moment to daven on their behalf. I know it would be greatly, greatly appreciated by the family members. I also want to give a shout out, a happy birthday yesterday to Kenny Weiss, celebrating a milestone birthday. And we had the privilege to kind of drive by and see him. And the day before, Kenny's sister, Rebecca Horn. So good job with the parents having children born a day apart. Different year from what I understand, but day apart. And Mazel Tov and happy birthday to everyone there. I was thinking about a Dvar Torah again. I'm not going to do Perkei Avos because I wanted to do something for Shabbos. But sadly, this morning I'm trying to get this done early because I'm on my way to help at the funeral for the father of Jerry Yoskowitz. And a note about that is that this is my second funeral that I'm doing this week, and I've never experienced anything like this, where because of the current health situation, where numbers are limited, what you can do in the cemetery, being Rosh Chodesh also, and being that it's pouring outside and whatever it is, but I'll just give you an example. On this past Sunday, I was doing a funeral in Long Island, and the only good part about that is that there was no traffic getting there. But that was the only good part. But being at a funeral, there were 150 people online or whatever it was, and only 8 people at the cemetery. But when I was talking to the cemetery workers, and many of you have been in New Montefiore Cemetery, on an average Sunday, they have, 4, 5, 6 funerals. He said that on that Sunday they were doing 32 funerals. 32 funerals. So, again, our condolences go to Jerry and to his whole family. And I think it behooves us as a congregation to reach out. Yesterday we sent out the information. And what should not come into play is, do I know him? Do I not know him? It doesn't matter, especially in a time like this. You have an email, you have a number, you could text. It doesn't matter whether you know one another well, not well, or at all. But as members of the congregation, we can certainly reach out and show our support in a time of need, because imagine what it's like. In Lo Aleinu, we shouldn't know this experience, but to have to go through a burial and have to go through ultimately a private shiva where you can't have visitors and we can't have a minyan and we can't even recite Kaddish. So it's rather heartbreaking. So again, our condolences to the whole family. And in thinking about cemeteries, and of course next week is going to be Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, which in general we always have difficulty trying to relate here in the diaspora. This year even more so. But what's even more painful to read about is that the government in Israel has ruled that they're going to shut down the country basically for Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. So what that means is that whereas normally so many thousands of people go to the various cemeteries across the country in Israel. And that's the reason why that if Yom HaAtzmaut on the calendar falls on a Monday, they push it off. Because if Yom HaAtzmaut is on a Monday, that means that Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, is on a Sunday. And if that's on a Sunday, they were worried that people would be traveling on Shabbat to get there on Sunday, so therefore they push it ahead one day. So it starts later. This way they don't have violation of Shabbat. But this year, you can just imagine the pain and the suffering. And I've been in Israel, and I've experienced it firsthand a couple of years ago, what it's like to be in Israel on Yom HaZikaron. It's so sobering. It surrounds you, it engulfs you, you can't escape it. But people who, the whole year almost, maybe that's the only time they go to visit their sons, or their parents, or their brothers, or their uncles, or whoever it might be, who died in any of the battles for Israel's existence. And this year they can't go. Just another layer of difficulty, of complication, of sadness that is added because of this pandemic. But when thinking about the Israeli memorial cemeteries for soldiers, of course we think of Har Herzl. If you haven't had the opportunity to visit Har Herzl, God willing, you should. And now they have built a brand new memorial where they have the name and of every single soldier, and they have the date, and on the yard site, the light goes up. It's the most spectacular structure, and I highly recommend going to visit it. But Har Herzl's right there in Jerusalem. It's right across the street from Shari Tzedek Hospital. And you could take the light rail there, and you can get off. You go to Yad Vashem, and then you do what's called the Shvil. They have the path that you go from Yad Vashem, and you walk through to Israeli independence, and you see many of the great leaders of Israel who are buried there. But of course, the heroes who fought for Israel's existence and for Israel's survival. So I'll tell you the story about Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was a Gadol Ador, we mentioned him a couple of weeks ago, and he lived in Shari Chesed. Shari Chesed is sort of at the entrance to Rechavia. If you imagine where Wolfson Towers is over there. And his yeshiva was in Beit Vagan. And every single day when someone would drive him to the yeshiva from Shari Chesed to Beit Vagan, and you had to pass by Har Herzl. And his driver recorded that on many occasions, Rav Shlomo Zalman would stop for a minute and recite Tehillim. He would stop for a minute and say Psalms by Har Herzl. And they didn't know why, and I heard the story in the name of Rabbi Millstone. Rabbi Millstone, who we spoke about when we did the Haggadah, who is he's the head of the Midrashav, Midrashat Harova, where my daughter attended seminary last year. And Rabbi Millstone relates the story that one time one of the yeshiva Bachrim, asked for permission from the Rosh Yeshiva. He asked Rav Shlomo Zalman if he could go take a couple of days off to Kivrei Tzadikim. Now, there are a lot of famous people that are buried in Israel, a lot of famous rabbis. So if you go up north, for instance, if you go to Meron, you have the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai, or if you go into Tveria, you have the kever of the Rambam, Rabbi Akiva, or if you go into Tzfat, and you have the many famous, the Shlomo Alkabetz, and you have all the Arizal's kever and the Arizal's mikvah. So he wanted to take a couple of days off. He says to go to Kivrei Tzadikim. I want to go and pray for whatever it is that he had to pray for, and I want to go to the graves of the righteous. Rav Shlomo Zalman looked at him puzzlingly and he said, I don't understand. Why do you need to take 3 days off and go so far? Right across the street. 2 minutes away, you have tzaddikim buried right there in Har Herzl. And that explains it. Is that don't ever underestimate the value and the sacrifice of those who got us to where we are. Whether it's fighting for the state of Israel or whether it's fighting for our Yiddishkeit to make sure that we are who we are. So therefore, it behooves us to pay them honor, whether we can do so in person, whether we have to do so virtually, but we have to pay them honor nonetheless. And with that, I want to wish everyone a Chodesh Tov, a Shabbat Shalom. I would also just like to point out the following yard sites that will be observed this week in our shul. Leah Gisha Bas Rav David, Yehuda ben Mikos, Ronan ben Yisrael Halevi, and Michal ben Emmanuel. Again, their neshama should have an aliyah. We should have indeed a Chodesh Tov. And as I mentioned yesterday, that ER is the letters of Ani Hashem Rofecha. I am the Lord, your healer. Let us hope that this is a month of healing. Let us hope that this is a month of blessing. And let us hope this is a month where we can start to begin to get back to normal. Shabbat Shalom.